The Kylie murders. Justice delayed, not denied. Case summary. Hey there, true crime enthusiasts. Detective Shernan here. If you're a first-time viewer, hit that subscribe button because you don't want to miss what I'm about to share with you today. This is one of the most shocking cases I've ever investigated, one that proves that sometimes justice takes time, but it never forgets. In October 1998, in the small city of Kylie, a police officer named Alex Kane was brutally murdered in a film company building. His service weapon, a Type 64 pistol, was stolen. Just 44 days later, an entire family was massacred in their apartment. Raymond Gordon, the director of the Bank of China's local branch, his wife Helen, their teenage daughter, and even a kind neighbor who had the misfortune of checking in on them that day. What makes this case extraordinary isn't just the brutality of the crimes, but what happened afterward. The killer didn't flee to some remote hideout. Instead, he remained in plain sight, gradually climbing the ranks of local government until he became a high-ranking official with power and influence. For 18 long years, this case haunted the Kylie Police Department as one of their most painful unsolved mysteries. I was brought in when technology finally caught up with the criminal. A single distorted fingerprint left at the second crime scene would become the key that unlocked everything. Through a massive fingerprinting operation involving over 600,000 individuals, advanced restoration techniques, and relentless determination, we finally identified the killer who had been hiding in plain sight all along. This is a story about how violence breeds violence, how ambition and desperation can create monsters, and how justice, though delayed, eventually caught up to a killer who thought he had gotten away with murder. The names have been changed to protect the identities of those involved, but the facts of this remarkable case remain intact. So pour yourself a drink, settle in, and let me take you through one of the most fascinating cold cases I've ever solved. Disclaimer: this video contains descriptions of violent crimes and is recommended for viewers 18 and older. Do not attempt to investigate crimes on your own, leave that to trained professionals like me. Part 1. The murders that shocked a city. Hey everyone, first, if you're enjoying this kind of deep dive investigation, take a second to hit that like button. It helps more people discover these true crime stories. The sun was just beginning to rise over the mountains surrounding Kylie City when my phone rang. The call came from halfway across the world. The Ministry of Public Security was reopening what locals called the Double Bank murders, and they wanted my expertise. I still remember stepping off the plane into the crisp mountain air of this remote city. Kylie sits nestled among jagged peaks, with narrow streets winding through neighborhoods where everyone seems to know everyone else. That's why these murders were so shocking to this community. They shattered not just lives, but the very sense of security that defined this place. As I flipped through the case file in my hotel room that first night, the details of the first murder jumped off the page. Alex Kane, 34, a recently appointed deputy police chief, had been ambushed in the stairwell of the film company building where he rented an apartment. His skull had been smashed with some sort of hammer or weight, and multiple stab wounds punctured his chest. But the detail that made my blood run cold? His service weapon, a Type 64 pistol with 6 bullets, had been stolen. They needed the gun for something bigger, I muttered to myself, making notes in the margin of the file. This wasn't random. This was preparation. I was right. Just 44 days later, on December 1st, 1998, a second crime occurred that was so brutal it still haunts the city. Raymond Gordon, the 43-year-old director of the Bank of China's Kylie branch, was murdered along with his entire family in apartment 501 of the Hospital 418 residential complex. His wife Helen, their 14-year-old daughter, and even their neighbor Sarah Liu were all brutally killed. The scene photos were difficult to stomach, even for someone like me who's seen the worst humanity has to offer. Sarah Liu's body lay just inside the entrance, a bullet wound to her chest and over 20 stab wounds covering her body. Raymond had been shot twice, including once in the head. His wife and daughter had been stabbed multiple times. The overkill suggests rage, I noted as I pinned the crime scene photos to the wall of my temporary office. But the robbery aspects point to desperation. Somebody needed money badly. What struck me most about the second crime was the failed attempt to cover it up. The killers had opened a gas valve, cut the pipe, placed a bullet in an electric fryer, and surrounded it with flammable material soaked in alcohol. They were trying to create an explosion that would destroy all evidence, but fortunately, there wasn't enough gas in the tank for their plan to work. Amateur hour, I said to the local detective assigned to work with me. But amateur doesn't mean stupid. They were thinking ahead, trying to cover their tracks. The most crucial evidence found at the second crime scene was a partial fingerprint on a clothes hook discarded on the bed. 4 triangular fingerprints, index, middle, ring, and little fingers that would eventually crack this case wide open. But in 1998, with manual fingerprint comparison being the only option, this evidence sat dormant, waiting for technology to catch up. "What's your theory, Sherman?" asked Captain Zhang, the local officer who'd been assigned to work with me. Why these 2 victims? What connects them? I stared at the map I'd pinned to the wall with red markers showing the locations of both crimes. Location is key here. The Bank of China branch and the police station where Alex worked were close to each other. Our killer knew both areas well, but the question is, did he know his victims personally, or were they targets of opportunity? What do you think, viewers? Was this a crime of opportunity, or was there a personal connection I hadn't yet uncovered? Let me know in the comments below. Part 2, the investigation that went cold. The original investigation in 1998 was massive. I reviewed notes from more than 500 officers who'd been involved, interviews with over 10,000 people, and 78 volumes of case files. The authorities had left no stone unturned, and yet the killer remained free. We traveled to correctional facilities across the country, explained one retired detective I interviewed. His eyes grew distant as he recalled the frustration. We carried wanted notices everywhere, but without modern technology, comparing fingerprints was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Walking through apartment 501, which had been preserved as a crime scene for 18 years, was like stepping back in time. The faded bloodstains on the floor told the story of that terrible day. Layers of dust had settled on furniture that would never again be used by the Gordon family. The windows were occasionally opened for ventilation, but otherwise, this tragic time capsule remained untouched. "They never gave up," I said, running my gloved finger along the door frame where Sarah Liu had tried to escape. For 18 years, they kept this scene intact, waiting for a breakthrough. That breakthrough would finally come in March 2016 when the Criminal Investigation Bureau launched an operation to tackle unsolved cases. The key was the advancement in fingerprint technology. What was once a distorted, blurry print became clear under new analytical techniques. The team discovered something crucial. The 4 triangular fingerprints had a pattern extremely rare in the general population, but somewhat common among certain ethnic minorities in the region. "This is how we'll find him," I said, studying the enhanced fingerprint images. "We need to collect samples from every male aged 33 to 63 in the entire prefecture." It was an audacious plan, over 1 million potential suspects. But the local authorities were committed. Day after day, thousands of new fingerprint samples were collected and entered into the database. The net was closing, slowly but surely. "Do you really think he's still here?" Captain Jang asked me one evening as we were reviewing the latest batch of results. After all this time, I nodded, sipping my coffee as I stared at the map. Killers don't always run. Sometimes they hide in plain sight. If I were betting man, I'd say he never left Kylie. This is his home turf, his comfort zone. On November 8, 2016, at a detention center where routine fingerprinting was being conducted, the system alarm sounded. The fingerprints of a minor offender named Harold Davis matched those found 18 years earlier in Raymond Gordon's bedroom. Harold Davis, director of the Urban Management Bureau of Kylie City's Economic Zone, deputy director of the city's Slum Renovation Office, a government official who had risen through the ranks over the years. "Got you?" I whispered, staring at his photo. The quiet, unassuming man in the government ID picture didn't look like a brutal killer. But behind those eyes lurked a darkness I've seen too many times in my career. When confronted with the evidence, Davis quickly confessed and revealed his accomplice, Peter Miller. The 2 men who had committed those horrific crimes 18 years earlier had been living normal lives in Kylie all along. One had even risen to a position of power and influence. But why? What could drive 2 men to such brutal acts? And how did one of them manage to climb the ranks of local government despite his bloody past? I'm curious, would you have expected the killer to have remained in the same city all these years? Drop your thoughts in the comment section below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're finding this case as fascinating as I did. Part 3. The Making of a Monster. To understand why Harold Davis became a killer, I had to understand who he was. Born in 1964 as the 4th son in a family of 5 children, Davis grew up in an environment marred by domestic violence. His father had an explosive temper and frequently beat his mother, sometimes sending her to the hospital. One particularly severe beating resulted in a brain concussion. Violence begets violence, I told Captain Chang as we drove to Davis's childhood neighborhood. What a child sees becomes normalized. The rage gets internalized. The Kowloon Automobile Transport Company, where Davis's father worked, was the most prestigious state-owned enterprise in the prefecture at that time. Employees' children formed tight-knit groups, often engaging in territorial fights and brawls. In this environment, Davis developed a reputation for being quiet, but extremely dangerous when provoked. He was small in stature, but very strong, recalled one childhood acquaintance who didn't want to be identified. He rarely spoke, but when he did take action, he was merciless. Everyone was afraid of him. Davis studied martial arts and even made his own gunpowder weapons to shoot birds. After his mother died and his father remarried, his only close friend was Peter Miller, who was 1 year younger. The two had similar backgrounds and complemented each other, Davis as the leader, Miller as the follower. Classic dyad relationship, I noted in my case journal. Davis provided the direction, Miller provided the loyalty and support. Before turning 20, Davis followed in his brother's footsteps and joined the Kowloon Company as a repairman. He supplemented his income by buying and selling goods during transportation runs between cities. Eventually, this side business became so profitable that he quit his job to pursue entrepreneurship full-time. This is when things get interesting, I said, pointing to the timeline I'd constructed on the investigation board. Davis becomes a businessman during China's economic boom in the early 1990s. His family connections give him an advantage his siblings work in the police system, and his wife's family holds important positions in the prefecture. Davis's ambition led him to open a movie theater, build the region's first bowling alley, and eventually establish a luxurious nightclub in the bustling Dashi area, the same district where Alex Kane would later work as deputy police chief. But in 1996, disaster struck. The nightclub was destroyed by fire, wiping out all of Davis's accumulated wealth in a single night. His subsequent attempt to start an ice cream factory failed due to mismanagement. Facing mounting debts and turning to gambling for escape, Davis found himself in desperate financial straits by 1998. So, here's our motive, I told Captain Zhang. Davis and Miller needed money fast. They hatched a plan to rob a cash transport vehicle, but they needed a weapon. That's where Alex Kane came in. Kane, Davis, and Miller had grown up in the same company residential area. They knew each other as children. But while Kane had gone on to university and joined the police force, Davis had taken a different path. The nightclub that Davis had operated was within Kane's jurisdiction as deputy chief of the Dashi police station. Kane was targeted specifically because Davis knew he carried a gun, I explained, connecting the threads of this complex case. They followed him, learned his routine, and ambushed him when he returned home late at night on October 17, 1998. After stealing Kane's gun and 6 bullets, the original plan was to rob a bank's cash transport vehicle, but the heightened security following Kane's murder forced them to change targets. During reconnaissance of a jewelry store, they noticed the Bank of China building and identified Raymond Gordon as a potential target. Gordon's apartment in the Hospital 418 residential complex was known to be well furnished with valuable items, I said. Room 501 was the only apartment with air conditioning at that time, a sign of wealth. On December 1st, 1998, Davis and Miller executed their plan, disguising themselves as visitors carrying cabbages. When Gordon's daughter opened the door to leave for school, they rushed in. The rest is a tragic history that I've already detailed. I wonder if you were investigating this case, would you have connected these dots sooner? What clues would you have focused on? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Part 4, Hiding in Plain Sight. The most fascinating aspect of this case isn't the crimes themselves, I told the team assembled in the investigation room. It's what happened afterward. After the murders, Miller fled to another province and disappeared from public view. But Davis stayed in Kylie, working as an agricultural vehicle driver traveling between rural areas. The turning point in his life came in 2000, when the Kylie City Economic Zone publicly recruited for a driver position. Thanks to a recommendation from James Hong, an influential leader in the economic zone who happened to be from Davis's hometown, Davis secured the job without difficulty. This wasn't random. It was part of a network of relationships that would enable his rise. From driver to government official in 7 years, I marveled, adding details to the whiteboard. That's an impressive climb for someone with blood on his hands. Davis proved himself reliable as a driver, eventually becoming Hong's personal chauffeur. When Hong was promoted to deputy prefecture chief and then mayor of Kylie City in 2006, he discovered Davis's talent for handling demolition and compensation work tasks that required both persuasion and firm resolution. Davis could be charming when needed and intimidating when necessary, explained a former colleague who requested anonymity. He understood people's pressure points. Around 2007, Davis transitioned from driver to civil servant, reducing his age on paper by 4 years and obtaining a university degree through questionable means. He began working at the Urban Management Bureau, specializing in demolition work, and was rapidly promoted. By 2011, he had become the director of the Urban Management Bureau and was living in a villa at the peak of his career. Ironically, he began to adopt a more cautious approach in his work, insisting on following legal procedures even when facing resistance from residents being relocated. He was trying to reinvent himself, I theorized. The violent past was behind him, or so he thought. But the fingerprints he left on that clothes hook 18 years earlier were waiting to tell their story. The beginning of the end came in 2013 when James Hong was arrested for corruption. Though Davis felt fear, he continued his government work. In July 2016, he was transferred to become Deputy Director of the Kylie City Slum Renovation Office, a position with political rank. This promotion would ironically lead to his downfall. When handing over his previous position, discrepancies in the accounts triggered an investigation by the Disciplinary Inspection Agency. Davis was detained on suspicion of illegally dividing state assets and accepting bribes, a minor offender in the eyes of the authorities at that time. But when his fingerprints were routinely collected at the detention center and entered into the system being used for the reopened Double Bank murders case, the alarm sounded. The killer, who had been hiding in plain sight for 18 years, was finally exposed. The irony is breathtaking, I said, closing my case notebook. If Davis hadn't risen to prominence, if he had remained a simple driver, he might never have been caught. His ambition led to his undoing. After Davis and Miller confessed to the murders, one crucial piece of evidence remained missing, the Type 64 pistol stolen from Kane. Davis revealed that he had kept the gun for about 23 years before throwing it into a river in 2001. In a massive operation that I personally oversaw, the police blocked water from an upstream dam, pumped the riverbed dry, and divided the area into a grid. Hundreds of officers and professional salvagers searched the mud piece by piece. After 4 days, they found the rusted gun and more than 40 bullets. Despite the decomposed plastic grip, technical measures confirmed the gun's serial number matched Kane's stolen weapon. On February 11, 2018, the Double Bank murders case was publicly tried. Davis was charged with stealing guns and ammunition, robbery, accepting bribes, and embezzlement. Miller was charged with stealing guns and ammunition and robbery. Both pleaded guilty. In his final statement, Davis expressed remorse and offered economic compensation to the victims' families. Miller, who said he couldn't eat or sleep in peace over the years and had developed a fear of darkness, asked to donate his body and organs to those in need. On July 30, 2018, the court sentenced both men to death, deprived them of political rights for life, and confiscated all their personal property. Justice, though delayed, was finally served. Before we wrap up this case, I'd love to know what aspect of this story shocked you the most? The brutal crimes or the killer's rise to power afterward? Let me know in the comments. Conclusion. Justice delayed, not denied. 18 years. That's how long it took for justice to catch up with Harold Davis and Peter Miller. 18 years, during which the families of Alex Kane, Raymond Gordon, Helen Gordon, their daughter, and Sarah Liu lived with the pain of not knowing who had taken their loved ones from them. Standing in apartment 501 one last time before it was finally released back to the building management, I felt the weight of those years. The preserved crime scene with its faded bloodstains and dust-covered furniture had served its purpose. The truth had been revealed. The victims could finally rest in peace. What's the most important lesson from this case, Detective Sherman? A young officer asked me as we prepared to leave Kylie. I thought for a moment, looking out at the mountains that surrounded this small city where such darkness had lurked for so long. Persistence, I said finally. This case was solved because dedicated officers never gave up. They preserved the crime scene. They kept the files active. They embraced new technology when it became available. And most importantly, they never forgot the victims. The Double Bank murders case reminds us that no matter how clever criminals think they are, no matter how well they hide or how high they climb, justice has a long memory. A single fingerprint, preserved for 18 years, spoke louder than all the power and influence Davis had accumulated. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please reach out for help. The violence that shaped Harold Davis's childhood set him on a path that ultimately led to destruction both for his victims and for himself. Breaking that cycle is essential. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of the most remarkable cold cases I've ever investigated. If you found this video informative, please hit that like button and subscribe for more true crime investigations. Share this video with friends who appreciate how modern forensic science is bringing justice to cold cases. Until next time, this is Detective Sherman reminding you that the truth always finds a way to the surface. Justice may be delayed, but it is rarely denied. Disclaimer. The names in this video have been changed to protect the identities of those involved in this true case. The events described are real, but certain details have been modified for privacy. Please do not attempt to investigate crimes on your own. Always contact law enforcement with information about criminal activity.